So, to preface, I would like to state that this story is probably going to read like the plot of a campy 1980s horror movie. It is going to be very long. However, this entire story is true. If not for being 5 miles from cell reception and the way the story ends, there would be a police report for verification. I will be changing names, locations, and some details in order to protect the privacy of the innocent. A buddy of mine and I try to camp twice a month now that I have a vehicle that can be trusted to get me to some of the more remote areas of our state. We planned a camping trip for this past weekend, which was the February 18th to February 20th. We chose a fairly remote location we had been to the previous weekend. The previous weekend, we were the only people we'd seen within 1 mile of our camp spot. Friday night, we got there and set up. This story takes place Saturday night. It's about 9 p.m., so the sun is long gone and the moon hasn't quite risen yet. It's pitch black out, other than what our fire lights up. Suddenly we hear a man screaming. We listen intently, silently sharing an anxious look. At first we were hoping it was someone drunk and having a little too much fun, but it quickly becomes obvious. This isn't fun party screaming. It isn't even like he's hurt. It sounds full of despair, anguish, and anger. I'm going to take a moment to remind you that this is at 9 p.m. Pitch black night, in the middle of nowhere, woods 5 miles from the nearest cell phone signal. We hadn't seen anyone in hours. The screaming continues for what felt like hours, but was probably about 5 solid minutes. We had no idea what to make of it, and started feeling extremely paranoid. We gathered up anything remotely close to a weapon and tried to come up with explanations of the screaming while keeping our eyes on the forest around us. After about 15 tense minutes of fear-induced paranoia, I nearly fell out of my seat as I watched the flashlight and lantern slowly enter our camp. I greeted the stranger with a basic, "How's it going?" before he was even lit up by the fire. He responded quickly but flatly by asking if we could do him a favor. "That depends on the favor," my buddy and I said in unison, obviously tense, holding our weapons close to us. The stranger proceeded to ask if he could hang out for a second by the fire. Given the 2 of us and 1 of him, plus our myriad of weapons gathered from around camp to within our arm's reach, we decided to agree and let him hang out. After a short second of awkward silence, I asked him what the hell is going on. He proceeds to tell me and my buddy that he was camping down the trail with his buddy, and that his buddy had snapped and tried to kill him. Wait, what? I said before the thought even finished processing in my head. Is that the screaming we heard earlier? The man slowly nods, staring blankly into the fire, and begins his story. "We were just hanging out, man. We came up earlier today and my buddy just freaked out. He started screaming and just wouldn't stop. Then he attacked me. He lunged at me, and I told him to just back off and chill, you know. Well, he kept coming after me and it started getting pretty violent, and I'm pretty sure he was going to kill me, so I grabbed my car keys, the lights, and ran. I don't know what to do, man. He chased me when I ran and I don't know what to do. We don't have firearms or anything, but we do have a hatchet." My buddy and I looked at each other for a second, completely astonished. Then something horrible dawned on me. "Wait, he chased you? Like, he's on his way here, right now?" The man just slowly nods in reply, and right on cue, like some terrible horror movie come to life, we heard screaming just maybe 30 to 40 feet from our camp, down on the main trail. "I just want your fucking balance, Gary. I want your balance, Gary. Gary, where are you? Where? Gary." I never in my life heard a man scream like this. I've never heard anything like it in my life. It was a brutal, guttural scream that was shrill to the ears yet deep in pitch, the sound of someone gone completely mad. In the way he said the stranger's name would switch erratically from long and sing-songy to short, guttural punches of sound. We killed our lights, became silent, and listened. By some miracle the madman didn't notice our camp and continued walking down the trail, screaming the whole way. We ended up chatting with, who we'll call Gary, for hours, listening to the screaming getting further and further. Come to find out, they'd taken 4.5 to 5 grams of magic mushrooms each, and his buddy, who we'll call Ty, was a co-worker of his, and was fine for 3.5 hours, then suddenly snapped. It seemed as though Ty thought he could kill Gary and steal his good trip. We heard the screams get further and further for over 2 hours. By this time it's 11 p.m. The moon is starting to come out, and it's below 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Ty had no jacket or flashlight according to Gary. My buddy and I are way too drunk to drive out of camp and to get cell service, as it was snowy and icy and required 2 to 3 miles of highway driving after getting off the trail. And Gary was still slightly feeling the effects of weed and mushrooms, so he couldn't drive either. We had to make the decision to let the guy wander, hope he sobered up and could find his way back. And he did. Oh, he did, right into our camp. We hear yelling about an hour of no screams, maybe 30 to 50 feet from camp. Hey, help. Please help me, I'm lost. And we can tell the man's walking from the woods into our camp. We tell Gary to hide just in case, and greet the man with me carrying my 12-gauge shotgun in my 40 caliber pistol holster, my buddy carrying his AK-47 stout rifle in his 2 9mm Glocks holstered, and with our flashlights on our brightest settings in his face. He was about 6'2 to 6'3 and approximately 300 pounds. We talked to him, decided that he was calm enough to walk with, and walked him back to his camp. He seemed really remorseful, said he blacked out and didn't remember anything, and he had a falling out with his buddy. He escorted him back to his camp down the trail, returned and told Gary that Ty seemed cool, and if anything else happened to scream and come running, we would come and help him out. Ended up being a happy ending. We made friends with Gary and I got his phone number to make sure the next day he got back into town safely, back to his wife and kid, and we're actually planning a camping trip with him soon. But Ty, who wandered screaming like a deranged maniac into the forest, potentially wielding a hatchet to murder your friend to steal his good trip, whatever it is in your psychosis-filled mind, was thinking, for the love of God, let's not meet again. The man I saw through my night vision scope. I'm a hunter. I like to hunt wild boar specifically, though I have been deer hunting and have been known to get a turkey for Thanksgiving. I mostly hunt boar. For those of you that don't know, boar are a big problem in the United States. A sow can have 2 litters a year, and it's not uncommon for a litter to consist of 10 or more pigs. Given that pigs eat anything and everything, it's not hard to see why the Department of Fish and Wildlife makes it legal to hunt them with almost no restrictions. In my state, it's illegal to hunt most large mammals with night or thermal vision scopes, with the exception of boar and coyote. I've been saving for a year, mostly fun money. It's hard to explain to your wife that a scope that costs literally twice as much as the rifle I was mounting it on was worth it. But I did. I took it to a range and sighted it in. There was an area that was peppered with boar activity that I knew would be a perfect for a night hunt. It was easily accessible with my truck, with easy to find spots that I could set up in that overlooked a large and easy to navigate clearing. The night started uneventful, mostly me tinkering with my new toy, cycling through the settings. I was a little impatient. I had spotted multiple deer, but they were out of season, and like I mentioned earlier, my current setup wasn't legal for deer. I moved to another spot I'd seen days earlier that probably wasn't much better than my first, but it gave me something to do and a new angle to look around with my new scope. After an hour or so of blasting the area, it dawned on me. This spot doesn't have much animal activity at all. No rabbit or owls. The deer that I'd seen were hundreds of yards from where I was. Why was this pocket of land so dead at night? but lively in the day. I'd set up around 10 p.m. It was about 2 a.m. when I started to think about packing up, maybe setting up a target before I left, and taking some practice shots. I heard a crunch come from the direction it came from before. I panned my scope over and saw the silhouette of a small bear pushing through the bushes. It's important to note that my scope isn't exactly night vision, it's a thermal scope, kind of like a black and white version of what you see in the Predator movies. I adjusted my range and zoomed in a little. I remember jolting a little when I saw that it wasn't really a bear. It was a man. Because he was so low and hunched over, I thought I was looking at a young bear. Is that a game warden? It couldn't be. I would have seen the headlights coming out the road from where I was perched. And where could he have walked from? I was 30 miles away from anything and on public lands. I was about to call out when I adjusted my sights and noticed he was naked. No shoes, pants or anything. I remember being disturbed by his movements, like a squirrel or something, twitching, grabbing at the foliage, sniffing around and palming the tree. Was that my tree? The one I'd been leaning against earlier? The thought terrified me. Could he smell me? Then he did something I still have nightmares about today. He squatted and placed his hands in the dirt between his feet and stared straight up like a dog, mid-howl. And I heard it. A voice coming from that direction. A very compelling female voice. Help! I'm lost. There was a long pause, but neither of us moved a muscle. The center of my sight was trained at the dirt in front of his feet. I couldn't bring myself to aim directly at another person who went against everything I'd been taught about firearms. Were they lost? Was this some guy that had gone crazy out here? Why was his voice so feminine? Help! Please, I can't walk, the voice called out again. That's when I called bullshit. Not only could he walk, when I first saw him, he was traversing the land with ease for a naked person. So good I mistook him for a bear. That's a fucking trap. This guy's trying to lure me to him with a damsel in distress routine. Luckily, the lack of activity before had caused me to pack up most of my gear. I think I may have left behind a hat and a sitting pad, but I didn't give a shit at that moment. I took my eyes off him for a moment to get my pack on. I buckled my chest strap and scrambled for my rifle. To my horror, he was sitting in the same position, but his face was staring in my direction, and I swear I saw a smile. The thermal scope has an effect that makes animals' eyes appear white. How the hell had he heard me get up and put my gear on? He must have easily been 150 yards away. Fuck off, I screamed in that direction. He stood upright and it hit me. How tall and skinny he was. Easily 6 feet and very lean. He took a couple of long strides in my direction and I instinctively sent a round, sailing above his head into the tree line. He was freaky as hell, but he hadn't really threatened me. What would I tell the cops? I was unwilling and unready to shoot someone. He stopped dead in his tracks and hunched down on all fours. The next one will fuck you up. Go away. He stayed on all fours, and this time I had my sights trained on the center of him. His eyes were just above the grass like a large cat or something. I was trying to stop my trembling and knew that my voice had cracked a little on that last warning. I was terrified. That standoff probably only lasted a minute or two, maybe less, but it felt like forever. In an instant he bolted left towards the tree line opposite the road. So much for not being able to walk. I could barely keep him in my scope, he was moving so fast. He disappeared into the brush, and I sent another bullet sailing high in his direction. I racked another round, and tried to pocket that mag, and swap for a fresh one, but I dropped it and didn't bother looking for it. I wasn't far from my truck, and I wanted to get out of here. I could hear him in the distance, yelling in this weird sound that could have been a laugh or a cry. I scrambled up the trail and arrived at my truck breathless. I tossed my gear into the cab, but kept the rifle in my passenger seat and sped off. For the longest time I told that story from the perspective of having spotted some deranged crackhead living off the land like some kind of caveman. I reported it to Fish and Game, but all they did was scold me for hunting at night alone. Never received an update. It wasn't until I told this story at a camping trip that my nephew told me about wendigos, rakes, and skinwalkers. My story scared the piss out of him because the spot we were camping was technically the same forest I'd seen the bastard, just 50 miles east of it. He was so spooked, his mom, which was my cousin, had to take him home. She was really pissed. I've gone down the rabbit hole, one of these scary stories. I'm not saying what I saw definitely was a wendigo or a skinwalker. I'm saying that if such a thing exists, I may have dodged quite the bullet that night. Or maybe it was just a tweaker being Donnie Thornberry in the middle of the night. Either way, thought I'd share.